Hi, I'm Skip Nipper. Welcome to Skip's Corner, the podcast where I tell you about not only Nashville's great baseball history and traditions,
shot to right, a one-hop liner,
but certainly about its past. And you will hear a little bit about its present and future, too.
Yes, he can, and makes the waist-high catch.
There are great stories about Tom Wilson Park, Herschel Greer Stadium, Sulphur Dell, and the players, coaches, and fans who love everything about baseball. And every once in a while, you will get to hear from a special guest who will share their fondness and even passion for the great game.
The high fly ball down the right field corner, going way back, hits a lead-off home run.
You may be aware of the Broadway play, The Music Man. It was turned into a movie at one point, and it kind of goes like this. In 1912, con man Professor Harold Hill arrives in fictional River City, Iowa, to swindle the citizens. A few traveling salesmen in the area have heard about Hill, who is known for a ploy in which he gets townspeople to pay to create boys' marching bands, with Hill faking his musical expertise and skipping town once he has their money. Well, when I was writing about a Nashville ball player who played at the turn of the 20th century, Hugh Hill, well, I don't know really what made me think of the play and the movie about the other Hill. Maybe it was just because the last names were the same. And Hugh Hill was nothing like Harold Hill. He was no professor, just a man who wanted to play baseball. And Harold Hill worked some magic in a small Iowa town, and Hugh Hill, the ball player, worked some magic in Nashville and in the Southern Association. So let me introduce you to the ball player, Hugh Hill. He was born on July the 21st, 1879 in Ringgold, Georgia, and he signed with Newt Fisher's 1901 Nashville Baseball Club in the inaugural season of the Southern Association. As a pitcher, he won 6 games while losing 5, playing in 51 games because, you see, he was also an outfielder. The ball club won the pennant that season, and when 1902 rolled around, Fisher had Hill on his ball club for another year. And what did he do in his second season? Well, statistics for those early years are a little sketchy, and it depends on which source you are looking at. According to one source, Hill played in 96 games and batted .296. Another source says he played in 51 games and hit .327. But in their booklet about the first 50 seasons of the Nashville Vols, Nashville Banner sports writers George Leonard and Fred Russell write in their book entitled Vols Feats 1901 through 1950, published in 1950, that Hill compiled the highest batting average ever by a Nashville player in 1902 when he hit an astounding .416 for 91 games. Now, those same sources say he pitched and won 22 while losing 7, and another says he won 21 and lost 9 games, and Leonard and Russell say he was 21 and 11, and all 3 sources done with the same results. The 2 Nashville sports writers raised the question in their booklet, when has a baseball player won over 20 games and batted over 400 in the same season? It is doubtful if that feat has ever been duplicated in all organized baseball history. So here's the rub, and I have local writer Bill Trauber who sheds light on the discrepancies in a Looking Back article he wrote about Hill in 2017. And Bill writes from another source that he contacted, Ray Nemick searched the league records game by game and discovered that Hill's .416 average was not correct. Nemick learned that Hill lost 37 hits and gained 21 at-bats to hit in .296, and he believes that Shreveport's Frank Hulsman at .360 won the batting title for the second straight year. Ray Nemick is very thorough and one of the country's most experienced baseball researchers. The official record cannot be changed since the league has not existed for decades. Still, Hill remains in the history books. And Nemick told Trauber, When checking for players' records, it became apparent that the averages published for the 1902 Southern Association included players listed for the wrong teams, and averages were inconsistent with their game-by-game activities. Some records were for fewer games than the player appeared in, etc., and it's a real mess. And Nimick added that he used box scores from Sporting Life and various newspapers to compile averages for the players, listing their span with the teams, adding extra base hits for batters, games started, and complete games for pitchers, etc. And since the league folded over 40 years ago, there is no one who would have an interest other than people doing books. And the records were put on file with the Minor League Baseball Museum. Now, another source, the Reach and the Spalding record books, show Hill's .416 average. So, what do we believe? Now, I know that none of the sources give credit to Hugh Hill as winning the batting championship in 1902 with a .416 average, at least not the ones that I told you about. The argument is he did not have enough at-bats to qualify. But my argument is if the league office reported to Reach and Spalding and they published that that was the batting average of .416, who are we to argue with? And there's one additional source, actually several, published by the league office of the Southern Association, edited by the president for league records. And I have several of these that I refer to often. And they have Les Fleming, who played for Nashville in 1941, batting .414 is the best average in the Southern Association. And he actually needed only one more hit to have reached .417, and thereby ending the argument completely. And third highest batting average belongs to Vols outfielder Phil Weintraub, who batted .401 in 1934. And I believe they're the only three players to bat over .400 in the 60-year existence of the Southern Association. So there's another source. Why don't we see what was said in 1956 when Hill was featured guest at the Nashville Old Timers Baseball Banquet? He was 76 years old when he came to Nashville. And George Leonard wrote about him in the January 27th edition of the Nashville Banner. He wrote this: "One of the distant past appearing is the hale figure of Hugh Hill, all-time Southern Association batting champion, .416, with the 1902 pennant-winning Vols, came from his home in Cincinnati as a special guest for the occasion, and he called Nashville his favorite city." Now, Leonard continued his article, noting that Hill took a few practice throws on the mound at Sulphur Dell. Of course, when Hill played here, the ballpark was turned around in the opposite direction, was turned around after the 1926 season. And Leonard went on to say Hill, who has lived in Cincinnati for the past 40 years, said he was offered $90 a month in his first season, and he couldn't get to a pencil quick enough to sign the contract. And he received a $10 monthly raise in 1902 when he accomplished the feat. And he said, "As I remember, I had to get 6 for 6 in the last game to win the batting championship," said the left-handed pitcher and right-handed hitter. And he closed with a final memory about Sulphur Dell. "Once, I remember, I hit 2 home runs in one game, and the fans showered the field with money. The cops had to stop the game and shovel up the coins. Must have been $65. The fans here were always wonderful. I've never forgotten how grand they were." Well, that's a different story than the Harold Hill story. They both were wanting money. The professor was in it for a different reason than our Hugh Hill, and sure, it was about making money. But Harold Hill did it the underhanded way before the folks loved him for providing musical instruments for the town of River City. And Hugh Hill, who passed away a few years later at the age of 79 in Cincinnati, stood firm with his conviction that he had the highest batting average in the history of the Southern Association, which folded in 1961. And he had 2 of the most trustworthy sports writers in the country, Fred Russell and George Leonard, to back him up. I would never argue with anything Fred Russell or George Leonard wrote, so my cap's off to Hugh Hill's magnificent accomplishment of batting .416 one season.